The Shark Deck.
I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Late night writers on strike. The Late Bot said New York City's yellow skies from the forest fires are like an homage to the subways, paying tribute to the countless yellow-walled urine-stained stations that have become part of the iconic landscape. It's like the skies are saying, this is New York City and yellow is our color. Meanwhile, Pete Davidson taking on Peta. Apparently, Pete's tired of being compared to a stray cat. Pete Davidson and Peta are going head-to-head in a billboard war. It's like a rap battle, but with cute puppies and kittens on the side. On yesterday's podcast, told you about that billboard. Apparently, Pete did not hire a billboard, which is kind of a shame because I sort of like the insaneness of that, but it wasn't Pete. It was a group called Core, and they tell the New York Daily News they are responsible for a rotating digital billboard at the corner of 43rd and Broadway. The billboard says Peta can't handle Pete's BDE. And they clarify BDE stands for Buy Dog Energy. Pete is having none of this. They say it's tragic that Pete didn't seek out a borough-born mutt from a city animal shelter because a scrappy New Yorker with charm, personality, and unconventional handsomeness could have been his perfect match. I like that they got that in there. You may recall Pete had left a voicemail. More details on the voicemail. Apparently, Pete said, my mom's effing dog, who's 2 years old, died a week before, so we were all sad, so I had to get a specific dog. That was the same voicemail where Pete suggested that the person... how do I explain this? Mouth stuff? You got it. Move on. A spokesperson for Core, who put up the billboard, said, we all think dogs deserve love. Peta thinks dogs deserve an early grave. Maybe instead of harassing celebrities, Peta should focus on actually helping animals. The world could use a little more BDE, and by that, I mean buy a dog energy, of course. Peta, in a statement to the New York Post, called Core fundamentally dishonest. The billboard is a front group for the puppy mill industry. Among others, it does not provide services or find homes for animals. It has a financial interest in propagating misinformation about Peta's rescue team, which is on call 24/7 to offer relief to abused and suffering animals and provide end-of-life services for people who can't afford to pay for their sick and dying animals to be put to sleep. We encourage everyone who cares about dogs to adopt from a shelter and ignore this greedy group's attempt to make a buck off the backs of suffering puppy mill dogs. Core is a nonprofit. They say they research and expose a variety of activist groups. Apparently, Core has taken on different names over the years, including the Center for Consumer Freedom, and they have fought Peta back and forth over the years. Interesting, Peta added, this billboard and anybody who supports it is on the wrong side of the issue. More Pete Davidson news. He missed his shows in Raleigh, but it wasn't Pete's fault. It was those forest fires. His flights were canceled. He couldn't get there. Meanwhile, on Gossip Corner, Kim Kardashian addresses rumors that she and Pete Davidson had rekindled their romance last year. You see, back in October of 2022, a report claimed that Kim had rekindled her romance with Pete, returning to one of their favorite New York hotels 2 months after officially splitting up. But Kim said on the Kardashians she was using the New York City place for a date with a new guy who she's calling Fred, and said, what's so funny is my friends wanted me to meet somebody, so we go to New York. And she picked that hotel. She said, that's like my spot because there's a private room downstairs. But then on the internet, it was like, Kim reconnects with Pete at this place. Kim was asked directly, was he there? Kim said, no. But it was the place that I would go and have my secret dinners with Pete. All right, pretty big Ted Lasso news. It caught a lot of people's eyes, including mine. Apple TV, they tweeted a picture of Coach Beard, Roy Kent, and Nate, and captioned it, smells like potential. People started wondering if that means there will be a Ted Lasso spinoff. Well, Coach Beard is played by Brendan Hunt, who was one of the co-creators of the show, and he did an AMA on Reddit. Will there be a spinoff? He says, we don't know. We need a break, and we'll take one presently. Nothing's been ruled out. Everything is possible, but that includes the possibility that we're done. We won't know until we've sat with it for a while, decompressed, etc. He talked about some of the plot lines from the recent season, including how it was teased there was maybe a relationship between Ted and Rebecca, maybe. He said the creators considered it out of professional responsibility, but never with enthusiasm. His theory, the coach and the club owner are soulmates, but that they can be soulmates without it being romantic. Brendan Hunt said, we've been taught by years and years of TV that when there's a male lead and a female lead, they end up together. That can be hard conditioning to see past. He addressed Coach Beard marrying Jane and Ted not being at the wedding. He said, story-wise, Ted had just boarded a plane back to the U.S., so it would have felt anticlimactic to have him back in the U.K. so soon. Hunt said, personally, I think Beard called Ted and told him he could sit this one out, and Ted said thanks because the ceremony conflicted with a big game for Henry's soccer team. The history of their relationship, in my opinion, is long periods of seeing each other and long periods not. We've entered one of the latter, but the former will come around at some point. They love each other. They'll see each other again. He answered questions about Beard's decision to marry Jane because some people found the relationship abusive. He says he doesn't think Jane is an abuser, though he admits their relationship is toxic. As Ted says, their baggage goes together real nice. They feel like they're the right person for each other. The main thing we know about Beard and Jane, he just loves her. She makes life more interesting. Where he was once addicted to meth, he's now, in my opinion, addicted to her pheromones. Did I miss the meth plot? Is he making the right long-term decision? Don't know. Is he doing something that he wants to do right now? Certainly, and there's joy to be had in that. Hunt said he and fellow creators Jason Sudeikis, Bill Lawrence, and Joe Kelly intentionally left Ted and Michelle's fate ambiguous when the coach returns to Kansas. This answers a question my wife and I had, and apparently Dr. Jacob no longer in the picture, and Ted and Michelle care about each other, but they're different people than they were when the show began, their priorities being good parents to Henry. As for Roy and Keeley, he says, I've known couples who've seen perfect together and then suddenly find they broke up. People who haven't begun to work on their stuff can sometimes find that they lose something they'd wish they'd kept. Taylor is back out on tour, selling out places all across the country. That's right, Taylor Tomlinson, back on tour. Who'd you think I was talking about? And Taylor Tomlinson said, I think we're definitely in the middle of a boom right now. Even my manager has said stand-up has never been like this before. I mean, people are playing arenas and doing multiple shows at theaters. That's a relatively new thing. Even when I was a kid, the people who did arenas were Dave Chappelle, Steve Martin, and Dane Cook. Did Steve Martin do arenas? I don't recall Steve Martin touring comedy since way back, and I don't know about that one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Facebook group, Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. Taylor said, now there are people I know that are in arenas, and even people who could do arenas but prefer smaller venues. She's trying to figure out the inconsistency of TikTok. Taylor says, it's hard to know exactly what to do on there. There's kind of no rhyme or reason to it, like what time of day to post or what will do well. Instagram is more formulaic. We'll run posts by each other and go, okay, is this joke good enough to do on stage? Or is this just a quick one for TikTok? I have to really make sure that I'm good with stuff about myself being out there before I talk about it. I struggled with that on the last special because I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about it. Then I started talking about it and it made me feel better. People were connecting with it. In my early and mid-20s, I'd kind of say anything on a podcast. I was a lot more loose on stage, and now I'm more intentional because people actually pay attention. They see me on purpose and remember what I say. She's doing shows at the Pikes Peak Center this weekend, then I'll head off to Kansas City after that, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Back in the States this fall, Colorado, September 22nd. Melissa Rivers is giving Joan Rivers assets to the National Comedy Center. This is pretty cool. The museum is in the planning stages of an interactive exhibition that will center on Joan Rivers' card catalog of jokes. Journey Gunderson is the executive director. She told the New York Times, when it comes to the Joan Rivers joke collection, I don't know that another exists that is nearly as vast. Carlin's archives were mainly scraps of paper organized in a Ziploc bag as they put in a folder. Rivers paid close attention to setups and punchlines, typing them up and cross-referencing them by categories like Parents Hated Me or Las Vegas or Nehu's Sex Appeal. The largest subject area is Tramp, which includes 1,756 jokes. Great article about this in the New York Times, and they've got some examples of it. So here are some typewritten cards. 1, fashion. My dress is by Calvin Klein. My body is by Frito-Lay. Here's one from April 11, 2003. I'm thrilled to be on Broadway. The only thing that could make me happier is if I'd slept with someone to get there. Here's one titled No Sex Appeal. My vagina is like Newark. Men know it's there, but no one wants to visit. Here's a beat-up sheet titled How to Handle a Heckler. I'm sure she told these better, but some of them. Button your lip. Your bridge is showing. How do you want your forehead? 1 lump or 2? Who is this guy in an empty suit? Hide your head in your ill-fitting toupee. Now, even the typeface here makes me think this is 60s. I worked with Joan around the turn of the century at WOR Radio. She had a radio show from 7 to 9 p.m. 2001, I worked with her a lot. I remember guest producing the show a lot during the anthrax scare that followed 9/11. I don't know if you remember that. If you're in New York, you probably do. She had 2 writers, an older guy and a younger guy, and they would sit there next to her, and they would just scribble things down on index cards, pass them to Joan, and she could deliver a joke that had been written 3 seconds earlier. She might not even know what it meant, but could nail the punchline. Really fun to work with her. And I'm going to leave you on a heavy note. This from People. Marie Tendler, ex-wife of John Mulaney, is mourning the loss of her French bulldog Petunia and reflecting on how the pet supported her throughout her divorce from John Mulaney. I'll warn you in advance, nothing fun for the rest of the podcast if you want to check out. This is going to get really sad really quickly. You ready? Petunia took her last breaths while cradled in my arms. Even after life had left her body, I sat with her, held her, and continued to talk to her. I told her how much I love her. I told her how grateful I was for her love and companionship. I promised her that I was okay and that I'd be okay without her. Crushed, lonely, but okay. Tendler wrote that in 2020, during, quotes, a severe mental health breakdown and what appeared to be the impending end of my marriage, Petunia would now guard me with the deepest kind of love I'd ever known. When I was hospitalized for depression, self-harm, and severe suicidal ideation in the first 2 weeks of 2021, the doctors asked me to make a list of my reasons for living. Petunia was the one and only thing on that list. Mulaney and Tendler announced their split in May of 2021. That news came 3 months after John Mulaney had completed a 60-day rehab stay to seek treatment after a relapse of his decades-long battle with addiction. Tendler writes, while Petunia had an undeniably adorable face, she was not what you call a good dog. She was, in fact, very, very naughty. She inherited one of the worst terrier traits, resource guarding. Oh, you dropped a tube of chapstick? Forget about it. That's Petunia's now. A sock didn't make it into the laundry hamper? Petunia found it? That's now Petunia's sock. Let this be a disclaimer to anyone who is lured to Frenchies by their expressive faces and silly personalities. If you're considering getting one, don't. They're a breed that persists only through human medical intervention, and ethically, that is not a type of dog that should exist. Petunia was a lemon, but she was my lemon, and I loved her unconditionally. That's your comedy news for today. Follow the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. See you tomorrow.